So Lee Haney had been Mr. Olympia pretty much for the whole time that I've been training and climbing up and everything. Well, there's a thing. Lee Haney was Mr. Olympia the first time in 1984. I started training in 1983. And so he's the icon in the sport and had a good shape, but he was a lot bigger than all the other guys. That was his thing. It overpowered them, right?
Lee Haney and Dorian Yates are two prominent names in bodybuilding. While Lee shares the space with Ronnie Coleman for winning the maximum number of Mr. Olympia titles, Dorian is on less with his 6 consecutive wins. Dorian's venture into bodybuilding came when Lee was gradually retreating. What does Yates think about Haney? Let's find out. Lee Haney. Lee Haney is a retired professional bodybuilder from the United States. He won the prestigious title of Mr. Olympia a record 8 times, tied with Ronnie Coleman from 1984 to 1991. Lee Haney is considered one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. Based on his competitive record, there's no question that bodybuilding was what he was born to do, having as impressive as a resume that one could have. At 19 years old, Haney won the 1979 Teen Mr. America. He took some time off from competition while continuing to improve, and in 1982, he won the Junior Nationals Heavyweight and Overall, Nationals Heavyweight and Overall, and World Amateur Championships Heavyweight. In 1983, Haney competed at the Olympia and placed 3rd in his first appearance at the prestigious competition. He won the Olympia the following year at just 25 years old and remained dominant at the show for the next 7 years until he decided that it was time for him to retire at 32 years old. Dorian Yates. Bodybuilding has to this point been dominated by dynasties or eras. It is impossible to sum up the sport's history with a series of names: Arnold, Haney, Yates, Coleman, Cutler, Heath. Each man racked up multiple victories and helped to change the sport's trajectory. Some, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, pushed bodybuilding into the mainstream. Others, like Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney, set near impossible standards for the era. But focusing on Dorian Yates, the 6-time Mr. Olympia who dominated the sport from 1992 to 1997 and ushered in what we know now as the mass monster era. He was lean, muscular, and fierce in his training. Yates's active career was defined by a self-professed monkish existence dedicated to being the biggest, most muscular man on the planet. For those 6 glorious years, the Shadow achieved just that. His combination of size and conditioning was never seen before, and it was an astonishing sight. As a 6-time Mr. Olympia, Yates arguably did more to shape bodybuilding as a sport than any of his contemporaries. It is unsurprising, then, that he is still held in such high regard by fans. Dorian Yates on Lee Haney. Lee Haney is responsible for leading one of the most successful IFBB pro careers in the history of the sport. During his tenure, which took place through the 1970s to 1990s, Haney was a force to be reckoned with any time he took his talents to a contest. He is tied with Ronnie Coleman for acquiring the most Mr. Olympia titles at 8. In the process of establishing himself as an all-time great, he competed against a number of bodybuilding legends like 3-time Mr. Olympia Frank Zane, his successor, and 6-time Olympia champ Dorian Yates. Having seen Haney like an idol, the feeling of sharing the stage with Lee felt surreal for Dorian. When the realization finally hit him that he would compete against him, the budding bodybuilder started to change his mind. He made himself believe that even he could beat him up.
So I'm a fan, basically. But now I'm going to go compete against him. He's big. I saw him guest pose in England. It's an inspiration, big guy. So I realized I can't be a fan anymore, man. I got to get a little bit ruthless here. Change my mind. Sure, he doesn't train as hard as you. So, this process is going on. And I'm going to try and beat this guy. I don't know if I will or if I won't, but I'm going to give him my best shot, and I'm going there with this positive attitude. I'm not going there as a fanboy.
Considering himself to be better, Dorian, when he finally shared the stage with Lee, did something unexpected. Taking everyone by surprise, as he quoted, purposely banged my elbow onto him. The incident was hilarious and speaks volumes about the competition the bodybuilders gave each other. All set to give his best at his debut, Mr. Olympia Dorian was all pumped up. New to the whole new professional world of bodybuilding, the budding bodybuilder had no clue about how Lee has in real life. So, when a guy from New York told him that Lee was very aggressive and went on the "he'll try to intimidate you," Dorian believed him. As for Dorian himself, he was pretty aggressive on the stage. Now, with a preset notion about Lee and his already competitive spirit, Dorian was all set to set a benchmark in his 1992 debuted Mr. Olympia competition. As the competition progressed, 2 got call-out. Dorian knew this was it, and he was just an inch closer to securing his win. Leaving no scope for the defending champion, he was all ready for the showdown. Lee smiled at him, and instead of reciprocating with a smile, Dorian gave him a stone face. While Lee was quite unbothered and continued with the usual drill and his semi-relaxed pose, Dorian on purpose banged his elbow into him. Quoting Lee's expression, Dorian says, "He must have been, 'What the hell is this crazy?'" Sharing more insights about the said incident, the 6-time Mr. Olympia champion says he deliberately banged Lee a couple of times. Though Lee was not reciprocating for a long time, when the time for the pose down came, he could not hold himself back any further. Lee took the opportunity. He spread his arms in a way that made Dorian appear at his back. He kind of got him and was fully aware of it. Lee clipped Dorian with his knuckle. That year, Dorian, much to his dismay, could not claim the title. The two legends sat down and talked one-on-one after burying the hatch many years after. Apologizing for his behavior, Dorian said Lee was his long-due sorry. Yates and Haney, a possible rivalry. Lee Haney was born on November 11, 1959. Less than 2.5 years later, on April 19, 1962, Dorian Yates entered the world. Given the proximity of their birth dates, the law of averages would seem to dictate that their athletic careers would have closely overlapped. But surprisingly, they only met in competition once, a titanic clash at the 1991 Mr. Olympia in Orlando. The reason that these two battleships only passed that one night is that they took up the sport at different ages. Haney got serious about bodybuilding when he was 16 in 1975, and 4 years later he was the 1979 Teenage Mr. America. By 1983 he was a pro, and notched his first pro victory that year at the Night of the Champions, 6 months before his 24th birthday. In October 1984, a month before he turned 25, he was Mr. Olympia and would win the title a total of 8 times before he retired after the 1991 event, age 31. On the other hand, Yates didn't lift a weight with onstage intentions until the summer of 1983, when he was 21 years old. He entered his first contest in 1985 when he was 23 and earned his pro card at the 1988 British Championships, age 26. He made his pro debut age 28 at the 1990 Night of Champions and entered his first Olympia in 1991. Thus, at his Olympia start, Yates was 29, while at the same event, the Awesome One was 31, and with 8 Sandos, said sayonara to the sport. Just think, if Haney had started bodybuilding a few years later, or Yates had started a few years earlier, they could have provided bodybuilding's version of the Ali vs. Frazier. As it was, their one epic clash still lives in the memory of those who witnessed it. At the 1990 Olympia, Haney gained his 7th title to tie Arnold Schwarzenegger's record haul of Olympia wins. So the only reason he entered in 1991 was to gain an 8th title and edge clear of Arnold. If he had been in the lead with 7, he wouldn't have entered in 1991, and bodybuilding would never have seen such a war of attrition as Haney and Yates provided. Of course, history recorded the fight because, despite Yates taking the muscularity round, Haney took the symmetry and posing rounds, and thus his 8th Sando. But what an epic battle it was, and if the timing of the onset of their careers had been closer, who knows what fireworks we would have seen, and if they had met multiple times. Still, we are left with the insolvable debate of whether would Haney have been able to handle a 1993 and onwards Yates, or would he have been jolted into further improvement by a rival who matched him in height and muscle, and who could take him on in back shots. Lee Haney on competing versus Dorian Yates during reign. Haney believes the sport has changed drastically since his time in the spotlight. Not only have pro cards become easier to get in his opinion, but bodybuilders lack the quality they once had on the sport's most prominent stages. Overall, he maintains that modern bodybuilders have gained more size but sacrificed muscle separation. During a video, Haney said there was no doubt that he would have defeated Yates in 1992 had he come out of retirement. The 8-time Olympia winner believes muscle maturity takes time, so he wasn't too concerned with Yates's IFBB Pro League rise. That's all for today's video. See you next time.